Welcome to another insightful episode of Me and My Health Up. Actually, today's episode's exciting because we're going to be talking about motherhood. Matriessence is, I guess, the term of becoming a mother. And so we're going to be exploring that from both a physical, emotional, and a spiritual well-being. And I have a great person, a great friend of mine, Lucie Kasna, who I met a few years ago. And we didn't think we'd be ever doing a podcast together, but she's built this fantastic community called For the Love of Mum. And I really love and excited to be talking to Lucie today. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you, Anthony. And really honored to be here on your podcast.
It's such a delight to have you on. And as we're discussing pre-episode, we actually never envisaged that we'd be both chatting to one another on a podcast in the future when we first met.
Yeah, that's right. If you told me 2 years ago that we will be, I'd say you're mad because, and this is the same, I've actually started my own podcast too. And it's something that I was so scared of always, and always admired people doing it because I was scared to publicly speak. So yeah, it's great. This is the growth, right?
Absolutely. It is the growth, and we're both growing as humans, and we've both been watching each other's growth from the sideline, I guess, and cheering one another on. So well done, Lucie. What's the name of your podcast?
For the Love of Mum. Yeah, same as my community.
Awesome. Yeah, so really keen to hear the backstory, and my listeners will be well adverse to the first question I always ask is how have you arrived at doing what you're doing today for the Love of Mum?
That's a great question. It's a little bit longer story. It started actually when I had my first one 6 years ago, or 6.5 years ago, my daughter. And it's kind of obvious, for the love of mum, I became a mum. And that journey into motherhood, being in a different country, so I was born in Czech Republic, as you can probably tell by my accent. I lived in UK. That's where I met my partner. And then 10 years ago, we moved to Australia. And 3 years in, we had our daughter. And, I ended up having a child with no support around me. And that was a shock to my system a little bit. My husband went to work 2 weeks later, our standard paternity, and you kind of left. You left with a child, at home. And what happened then was that I was sitting on my own in the silence of the room with this baby, and I think quite a lot of trauma came out at that time. So the first kind of 6 months, and this is what matriessence is, really is that spiritual, hormonal, physiological changes that mother goes through. And it's exactly the same as, a teenager. Teenager goes through that kind of hormonal spike. And when mothers do that too, and we are not aware of it. Like, no one told me that this will be happening, and it did happen. And I ended up being diagnosed with postnatal depression. And so that's the story, how it started. And how it progressed was that about 2 years in, I started to look into tools to support me. So I started kinesiology and kind of digging a little bit deeper into the trauma, childhood traumas, and subconscious beliefs. So started to peel that onion, the layers and layers, and you think that you've did something, you've healed something, and then something else come up, and it's actually it's a beautiful journey when you start enjoying it, when you start kind of going, this is beautiful. And then I, started to look at different tools. It's almost like creating this imaginary tool belt for yourself to support yourself and your emotional well-being. So I looked at meditation, and I did, meditation courses, and essential oils, and Reiki. I did my Reiki training, so energy healing, and so on, and adding this kind of those tools and modalities, if you wish. And when I look back, and I wish that I kept a journal that time when I started, because when I look back, you kind of go, whoa, I've grown so much, and it's changed so much. And now when I compare myself, mother that I am now to 2 children, 6.5 years later, to what I started, it's been an incredible journey. And I guess I wanted this for other mums. I want to offer the same growth, the same tool belt, the imaginary tool belt to other mums. And this is the kind of base for our community. So what we do is I bring in the professionals, the psychotherapists, the psychologists. We've got EFT, so emotional freedom technique, tapping. We've got coaches and healers coming every month. We've got a topic, and we do the events, so masterclasses every month. And this is how I kind of introduce those modalities to the community. And sometimes it resonates, sometimes it doesn't. We're all different and we resonate with different things. But really it's about the exposure. And, sometimes you are exposed to something and you go, not right now. But then a couple of months later or years later even, you go, actually, you know what? I'd love to try this. Yeah. So it's more just, opening up our horizon of things that are available and those tools that are available to us.
Because, your experience is probably becoming more mainstream, or probably more the norm, in terms of that being away from close and immediate family when you start your own family, typically or traditionally, more traditionally as opposed to typically, is that, required a tribe or a village to raise a child. And essentially we've gone away from that village model. We're migrating around the world, so siblings and everyone's moving into different parts of the world, finding, falling in love and then settling down in those new areas without that family, immediate family, and I guess strong friendships initially. And so I could, see your situation as sort of being, well related to other listeners on this podcast, and certainly, on your podcast is, I guess, the tribe you're attracting of people that are in similar positions where they don't have that community and immediate support.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. We are tribal people. That's how we're meant to be. And also, in every tribe, you've got a role to play, right? And when you are on your own, you're trying to probably do all those roles, and the expectations on yourself is too much as well. So you are absolutely right. This is exactly why I've been called in a way to create this, because I'm creating it for myself as well. So I'm creating that community, not just for the moms in the community, but also for myself, and calling the people that are in the same situation. Absolutely. And, funny you say, we actually moved from Sydney, and I love Sydney. Don't get me wrong. We've lived there 10 years, but we've recently moved to very close to Byron Bay, and it's a little community here called Pottsville. It's a town called Pottsville. And in 2 months, I have probably made more friends than I did in 2 years in Sydney. And it's almost like coming home to where I was born in Czech Republic. It's a small village. It's like coming home, just with a sea near. Because it's that, the community is so strong here. Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's definitely something that I wanted to create online for people that travel and don't have the luxury to move back to the communities.
Yeah, it's really impressive from that point of view that you're attracting like-minded people, and those like-minded people are, supportive and really building that strong community of being supportive for one another and sharing stories and sharing, I guess, advice or recommendations as to what's helped them through various situations that, that mothers have faced with raising a kid. And so it's really nice to hear, and certainly I can hear, I totally relate to what you say when you move from a big city into a smaller country town, how much more friendlier it is and how much easier it is to connect with others. And maybe it is because they see that there's a bit more dependence on getting support because they're small and there's not everything there, so that they may be a bit more reliant on the support of others around them in order to, I guess, achieve the basic needs of living. Not sure what the the reason why that is.
I'm still trying to work it out. The last 2 months, I keep asking the same question. What is it? What's the difference here? Even with, living in here and living in Sydney, I used to drive my daughter and my son to, the play dates. So you have to drive, drop them off, come back, or to different activities. And you spend everything is planned, right? There's a routine that we have to do. And it's actually quite stressful to have this kind of routine, but everything is so planned. Here is a lot more fluid. So, they come back and they just play on the street, which is, I didn't even think it exists anymore, kids playing on a street again. And so everything is a little bit relaxed, a little bit slower. And I guess, so good for our parasympathetic nervous system, it's beautiful.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head, so to speak. It is that country life is slower. And I think when, as you said, it's more fluid and less planned. So in that, if I were to find a good analogy or relate it to an experience, would certainly be lockdown. So with lockdown, we lost all our plans and we had to be more fluid. We had to just go with what we were told that we could do. And I actually found that people were stopping more and conversing more and being interactive more than ever than, during when we have all this planned and all this busyness and everyone's just chasing to get to that next deadline and they haven't got time to stop and talk. Whereas in COVID, what else could they do other than sort of chat and catch up with people? So I think that's what people really enjoyed about the lockdown phase was the lack of planning, the lack of commitments. I mean, it did get tiresome in the end, but certainly I think that's a fond reflection, and I think it relates well to the experience that you're experiencing being in a country town. In terms of the challenges that mothers face in terms of this journey into matrescence, and you mentioned it sort of brought up a lot of childhood things because I guess there's a couple of things that are happening here that you're alone, you haven't got support, and so all the vulnerabilities naturally come out when you're alone, and the insecurities start to arise. And then you're also looking at the newborn, and I guess you could see you in some way in that little one, that little innocent, beautiful being. And I guess then you start reflecting on your childhood and your upbringing, and hence why all that things in, as you said, were stuck in your subconscious mind has started to come into the conscious mind and really start to play havoc in terms of causing all sorts of distress. Is that what? Because I'm thinking what you experience, would be similar to what other mothers experience when they have a kid and they're really vulnerable because there's no manual as to how to raise a kid. No. I mean, and particularly if I haven't got mum around, because mum's got some experience, but if mum's overseas, then this is quite
That's it. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's vulnerability. It's a big one because it's so new. It's not something that you haven't experienced, but also what comes up quite often from mothers is expectations. We all have expectations. We had 9 months, right, to plan and think how our baby will be and how we as mothers or parents will be. We've got this idea in our head of just dreamy, running on the beach, playing all the time, being so present, cooking organic food all the time, everything from scratch. And those expectations in that 9 months, pre-baby journey, it's kind of building up, right? We are writing this story in our head. And then the reality happens. And the reality is, you are underslept, underslept that you've never been, coffee becomes your best friend, and, you want to do the best. But again, it's expectations. And when the expectations are not met, what do we feel? Disappointment. We feel fear as well. We feel, we don't feel good. It's not a nice feeling. And I think, there is so much focus when you become a parent on the baby. Everyone tells you, well, how is the baby? How is it's all always around the baby. Not very often you hear, how are you as a mum? How are you feeling? How are you coping? And I guess that, so that's your first experience of the first 6 months is somewhat, it is quite scary. And then as they start to grow, the changes they go through, it's, you think you've passed the terrible 2s, and then something happens at 3, and, you think you nailed something on a head, and then they change again. And it's a beautiful journey. But really what we need to remove is the expectations and just be present. And every child has different needs, and we all have different needs. And as you also mentioned, and I really like the reflection of, you're looking at your child, and you kind of remembering all your childhood and everything else. And also what they really good at, children, and especially when they're a little bit older and they start to kind of talk back and mirror you, it's really mirror what you don't want to see from yourself. They pull up those little nuggets of like, oh, I just saw myself. Damn, and I did not like that. So as your child grows, you are growing as a person. If you're observant enough, you can really see what you probably like to change in yourself. And I guess this is where the community is not focused on parenting, how to parent or your children. It's purely focused on the mums and supporting their journey and supporting their growth and reflection and self-inquiry.
I love that gem that you raised in terms of letting go of expectations and just being present and going with the flow of being a mum and enjoying that journey of being a mum. And I once saw a definition of stress, and it was the difference between your expectations and your reality. And as you'll say, in that, that 9 months of gestation is, you're painting this picture of what you expect it to be, and then the reality hits and it's not what it is, and it's a big gap, and hence a lot of stress for mum. Whereas
that's exactly what it is.
What you discovered was if you let go of that expectation and just be mum, then it's a much nicer, less stressful experience. And I think the other point that you raised was this community you've created is not about teaching people how to parent, because I think that's a really hard thing to do, given that everyone has different values and beliefs. You get what I mean? Like, so is there any, it's pretty hard to, unless you align to that person's values and beliefs, then you're not going to align to their way of parenting. So I think it's great that you just focus on the support for mum and building that community. I was just wondering, within that support network you have, there'd be lots of mums, talking about their challenges. What is some common challenges that are facing the mums of today?
That's a really good question. I think being stressed and overwhelmed. Overwhelm comes up so often. And I think it's definitely to do with the expectations that we put ourselves, to be a parent, to cook the delicious meals, and to also work, have a full-time job, because it's really hard, right? It's not very common that the man of the family stays home with children. Pay up and all that. It's mostly, most common that the man works, and women goes to, they could have, I had a career before I had children, and I still do. but I don't work full time. But sometimes even, you have to adjust your career goals. So your career slows down. And then you start thinking, what's my worth? What's my value? And so often, you see those comments, oh, you're a mum, you're just a mum. And that's such an awful comment, because, being a mum, it is a full-time job, and it's such an honorable job, and we should honor any women to do that. So I think overwhelm comes up so much as a problem for us, for mums, because we try to do everything. We try to have a career. We try to be the best mom. We try to be the best teacher for our kids when we're homeschooling. We try to be the fun, and sometimes the fun goes. And I have to say, I went through probably a few years where it was an effort to stay fun, like the frustration bubbles up. You get pulled and triggered by a lot of things. So yeah, introducing that self-care, lack of self-care for mums, because they always put themselves last, and they will. So refilling the cup, so helping them to realize that you really can't pour from an empty cup.
Agree. And what are some key things that you find that really support mothers in this refilling their cup and keeping it full so that they can have more fun times?
That's a really good question. And you know what? Self-care is one of those loaded terms for me, because it really depends on what, who you are as a person. So it could be having a massage, but you know what? It actually could be what I love. And this is my type of self-care, is if I have time to be in a kitchen on my own, podcast in the ears, and just cook really delicious meal. So that's my kind of creativity and fun side, is being in a kitchen. And that could be absolute nightmare for other people, right? So really filling a cup and self-care, it's like, you need to know your values first. And it's actually something that it's a next month theme in our community, is how to know your core values. So if it is, freedom, if it is fitness, or, being healthy, or if it is, nutrition, or like, what are your core values? What do you live for, really? What fills your cup?
Yeah,
because if you know that, then kind of to fit those little bits in.
That's true. You're putting the big rocks in first, aren't you? And then, which are important to, the person, is that, because they're aligned to their values, and they're making time for for doing, or, living those values. So I think that's, and that I think you're alluding to there, that's when people really start to find that underlying why. And once they discover that why, it becomes a lot easier to, I guess, let go of those expectations, and to identify and to be just content with your identity. And I think you touched on a really good point there, was that identity crisis that kicks in. And there was something that came to my mind. I was thinking there's a real stigma attached to being a mother, right? Like, that traditional view of a mother that, you're just home cooking, raising kids, and that's just, you're just being a mum. You're nothing significant. Like, this is what it comes across like. You're not, you're not significant. And I think that puts added pressure, undue pressure on the mothers, because they feel that they have to have a career in addition to raising a children, where they might be completely content and just want to raise children. Whereas then they're thinking of the societal pressure that they need to be super mum, have a massive career, raise children, and stress themselves out. What are your thoughts? Yeah. Absolutely.
And you know what, you mentioned the identity, and I want to come back to that, because the loss of your own identity is real. It's really real. And it comes back then to the values. You know, when you do sit down and go, what are my values? Where am I? And you know, we've got a lot of mums that actually changed career after they had children because they realized that what they were doing before they no longer aligned to. And that happens, you know, quite often, and it's okay. But yeah, absolutely agree with the being a mum and trying to be the super mum. And also when you look at social media, you know, so often, or rather, it's very rare to see mums struggling on social media because we all paint that picture. We all paint that kind of idyllic motherhood. You know, look at me, I'm a really good mum. And I think I'm also guilty of that, you know, because it's the vulnerability in that piece. It's like I am sharing something so publicly and so vulnerable that it's scary. It's really scary. And this is where you need your network. You need your community where you can be vulnerable. You can come out and say, I am struggling today. I am really struggling and I need help. You know, what would you do? What, you know, or just, I'm not actually looking for an answer. I just want a sounding board. And, yeah, you know, the kind of super mum of doing everything and producing these fun meals for kids that look like bunnies and stuff. You know, I'm not like that, by the way. I really can't do that. But yeah, and having always clean house and tidy and picture perfect is, you know, it's so much pressure on our social media, and it's we need to kind of move away from that. I think it's good to have a bit of a cleanse.
Absolutely. I totally agree, because then, you know, again, it's just all focused around expectations and that comparison, you know, that picture of, you know, the mum that has it all together, and, you know, most people feeling, well, I don't have it together. So, you know, they get jealous of that mum that seems to have it all together, but they probably don't have it all together. Yeah.
No, it's not real.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It's definitely not real. We all know it. I mean, you are a parent, and you know, I speak to many mums. It's never perfect. It really isn't.
And the role dads or partners play in this, like, I'm thinking, because you know, from being a father, there's a bit of a struggle there to fathers, you know, also that they're going through that identity crisis as well, because particularly, you know, that traditional role of a father was a protector and a provider. And so now the provider piece is reduced because, you know, mum's earning income and in many cases more income than the father. And so, you know, the father's then wondering about their self-worth in that role. And then, you know, we live in a pretty perceived safe society that role of protector is probably diminished as well. And so it's a real interesting dynamic that's playing out in society, because men's, you know, mental health is declining. And I think it's because of their loss of identity or value. Maybe it's their self-worth. It's probably more of an issue. And then women are struggling because they're picking up more. And again, it's all driven by social pressures. So what's your, you know, things where where fathers can play a particularly significant role in supporting mum?
Yeah, you know what, it's a great question, and I did think about this before we started recording, that, you know, I don't want to sound exclusive in our community because I focus on mums purely. It's because dads are a little bit hesitant to come and be vulnerable in a you know, social circle. So it's a little bit more common for mums to be more open in that kind of women's circle. And men, you know, it has been, you know, for many, many years and centuries that the men, you know, went out and were the kind of the macho, I don't show any emotions or not too much emotions, you know, it's very controlled, and it's very, you know, staying in that power, staying in that kind of, you know, in control. And it is actually really tough for men, and I'm really lucky in a way, my husband actually stayed as a stay-at-home dad for a year when I went back to work. And it was the most beautiful time that he had with my daughter. Their bond is so strong. And, you know, to this day, I think it's stronger than I had with my daughter, you know. And he is very open to that. Like he doesn't feel like he's lost his identity or any kind of power in a way, which is good. And there are more and more groups popping up for fathers that are open to that, to talk about, you know, what's happening to their mental health, the societal pressures, and to their work and self-worth. So I definitely, if any guys are listening to this episode and it resonates, there are many groups that I can share later on, you know, that support dads in particular.
Yeah, it's a real interesting dynamic that's at play, you know, in terms of both sides, both sexes really, you know, they're struggling in their different ways. Yes.
I think we need to really stay open and in conversation between the partners, right? It's all about kind of, you know, how can I support you and how can you support me to, you know, it's never going to be equal. Let's be honest. You know, there will be ebbs and flows in our work, in our, you know, sometimes we just need to check out as well. And that's, you know, that's okay. We are human. But yeah, just supporting in that kind of open communication, you know, making sure that with any partner, you always have that open communication channel.
Yeah, I think that's the key one, is actually being open to asking for help. And I often see, well, again, both sexes, you know, struggle in their different ways in terms of reaching out and asking for help. I think women don't do it explicitly. Like it's more implied, like in a sense that they expect their partner or the male to pick up that they need help, but males just don't seem to have that ability, and they actually need to be asked, or, you know, so I think that's an important aspect around the communication, is that the mums actually ask in the exact words of what help they need, because men just won't pick it up, the signals, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. Yeah, I think we've learned now to kind of go, no, mate, I need help. Yeah. And men don't often ask because it's that vulnerable side. It's, you know, it's vulnerability, and we are still learning that. But, you know, I was actually, we were talking about this in our community last month, because if we can show it in front of our children, if we can practice this, you know, all the tools that we've got, all the modalities like, you know, meditation, mindfulness, asking for help, self-care, you know, having the time out. If we can practice that in front of our children and not, you know, shy them away from all of these things, it's normal. It becomes normal. So what we do really, we are, you know, you don't need to teach them anything, because it's monkey see, monkey do. We know it, right? So they will adopt it as normal, as thing that just happens. You know, we have, I've got this beautiful singing bowl actually at home. And every time I do it, my son sits down, crosses his legs, and goes like this. And, you know, he opens his arms and closes his eyes. And he meditates. He pretends to. But, you know, it's beautiful to see, because that's what they do. So if we can practice communication as well, with like mum and dad communication, and open channel, asking for help and stuff like that, that is what, you know, they hear it and they see it and they will practice that.
That's absolutely so true, that they'll mirror us as people. And so we, as much as we're never going to be the perfect mirror, and that's important not to be the perfect mirror, because we are human, but we certainly want to be mirroring the traits that we want to pass on, and not being that, doing the things that we don't want to pass on. So I think it's a really good example of how you're, leading your children to better manage their stressors in life, or find that peace and calmness, and nourish their self-care and value their self-care, because as you said, we often live in this society where, health comes secondary to career success or perceived success. And it's all about, chasing more money, more prestige.
That was turned around upside down in the last 2 years, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
You can, lose a job straight away. You don't, that prestige, that success, and all of that can go in a flash, but actually your health.
Yeah.
That focus on your health, and not only your physical, but emotional health, and how you go through challenging times like we are doing now. And what you tell your children, how you explain what we're going through now. How do you deal with that? And the resilience, emotional resilience. So, health is just, I think we are seeing it, that health is your wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with you. I think those that had valued health going into the pandemic, really had the tools and resources to help them through it. Whereas those that didn't, and it was more a, second tier or third tier priority, and all their, time was tied up into their career and success around that career, they probably struggled more than those that had the tools to support their health during that, really hard time of, not having much in your control, or lots taken out of your control.
That's it. It's all about the control. Yeah, absolutely agree. Because your health, that is in your control. Everything that you put in your body and your mind, it is in your control. But your job, especially if you're not self-employed, if you are, employed somewhere else, it's out of your control.
There's one thing that I really wanted to touch on before we finish up the episode is it's related to the stress and the overwhelm that mums experience. And the statistics show that the biggest drinkers are the mums in the age group, I think it's like 40s to 50s, that are consuming the most alcohol. And, you could sort of say that, is it a coping mechanism for mums because they're in that significant stress and overwhelm and really looking for that relief? And I'm thinking that's where your community really comes in to help address that underlying root cause, to help them, because obviously, excessive consumption of alcohol is not going to really assist the situation long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It sounds like a great idea to have a drink in the evening, but you can see the parenting and your coping the next day, right? Because you're more triggered, you're tired, you never have good sleep, all of that. And it's very unfortunate about these statistics. But I have to say that social media has actually quite a lot to do. It's been, it's been used as a joke, almost glorifying, like, mum's drink, like, is it a wine o'clock at 3:00, stuff like that. And I see it so often on social media where I'm like, it's not okay, because yes, you might be, if you're posting it and you're quite strong and it's a joke, but for some others, other mums who are vulnerable to those kind of influences, and they are in a time of struggle, it really kind of go, oh, maybe it's okay that I have a drink at 3:00, and it's okay that I have a glass of wine every night, or half a bottle, and it's just not, it's not okay, because also, again, we are mirroring, we are showing something to our children, our coping mechanisms are, not in check. And the way we parent, we know it, if you have a couple of glasses of wine and then the next day you kind of go, oh, I'm not present. I don't really want to play tracks right now. I'm tired. So I get more triggered. So everything becomes actually worse. So it's not, it seems like a great coping mechanism, but it's not. It's really not.
Yeah, I see your community as being that really good way to cope with the stresses of life and to have that supportive community of mothers that are like-minded, that are in a similar situation, sharing stories and showing their vulnerabilities, and you providing the experts that come in to provide the education and the workshops to help mothers through these difficult or challenging times.
Yeah, absolutely. And my coach, actually, Elaine Benson, she is sober now for, I think it's over 3 years. And, she's done programs for mothers to help them to become sober or manage their emotions and kind of management of alcohol.
We'll definitely include her details in the show notes. So please, share them with me, and I'll put them in the show notes so that those listening that are, wanting to break that, that cycle, that non-healthy cycle, they can obviously seek help. Please share a little bit more about your community and how people can join up, and that would be great.
Sure. So it's hosted on Mighty Networks, which is basically away from social media, because the last thing I wanted is to compete with the constant noise of social media. We know how unproductive that can be. So you can find us on For the Love of Mum. Mum is MUM, English spelling, .mn.co. And you can join up actually as a 1 month free trial. So you can come in, experience the month of events and chats and everything. We can also see entire historic content. So all our masterclasses, all our events, and you can binge on all of the great content that we've got in that month, and then decide whether it's something that resonates, it's something that would be helpful for anyone to join. And look, I wanted to keep this accessible for everyone, because for me, the biggest challenge is you don't want to pay lots of money. And I also want to support people who are not as fortunate. So it's worth of 3 coffees. And I think coffee is a currency for parent. So it's only $11 for a month. And I hope that, I wanted to provide, 10 times the value.
Or it could just be one wine. If you go out and buy a wine these days, it's about that amount of money.
That's a cheap wine as well, right?
Yeah, so, that's true.
It's not a good one.
No. Thank you so much, Lucie, for sharing your story and more about your community and the challenges and hardships that the mothers face during these current times. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And for the listeners, thanks for tuning in to another insightful episode, and stay tuned in for more exciting and insightful episodes of Me and My Health Up.